It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. Good morning. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara.
Hello.
Thanks for all the great calls and discussion we've had tonight. Everything
thank you.
From Doge.
Yeah.
We're really saving all this money. We asked earlier, are we going to see it in any of the Republican budgets? Somebody said, well, you know, they can change the budget every year, even if they do the 10-year plan. Well, then why not include some of these savings that they claim are happening now? We're asking the question, why aren't they in there? Simply a question, not an accusation.
Right.
We think what Doge is doing is wonderful.
Right. We're
We're just wondering if we have cut, as Elon Musk said yesterday, $4 billion a day right now, which is $1.46 trillion. How come we don't see any of that in the continuing resolution or the 10-year budget? And we know the budget will be changed, but if that's the case, if it can be easily changed, why isn't there communication between the Republicans? And it's a serious question. There's no sarcasm involved in there. I know at times I can be sarcastic, so I have to be clear when I'm not. But I wonder why. Because if you're doing this, you want to prove it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then that's a question there. Then we've also talked about tariffs and the cap on credit card interest rates, as now Senator Harley getting together with Bernie Sanders and Republican Representative Luna getting together with AOC to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Thanks to the one caller, I did like how when we were talking about tariffs, he said, well, then if these countries who trade with are gone, then the United States wouldn't exist. And it's like, well, we didn't make that claim. Don't put words in our mouth. But when you look at the reality of tariffs, because we've had other people say, well, tariffs, if tariffs are like taxation, that doesn't cause inflation.
Right.
Well, of course it does.
Yeah.
Production taxes cause inflation. Anything that you add to the cost of producing a product causes inflation. It may not be the kind of inflation that we see, for example, when government prints money or government drastically increases the money supply, as they did with the COVID stuff, but it still increases prices. This is from the U.S. International Trade Commission. This goes back to this would be let me see here, U.S. International Trade Commission, Trump's first term tariffs reduced imports of steel by 24%. You say it's good, right?
Right.
Also raised U.S. steel prices and domestic production by about 2% each. And as we've said, again, not 9%, but it still raises the cost.
Right.
The problem is when you look at how they affect other companies that use steel. And you go back to, let me see, I want to get to the, this was, let me get this here, the University of Wisconsin-Madison report in 2022 on the Bush tariffs, because I remember this specifically, that did the same thing. It decreased the imports of steel.
Right.
And you're saying good thing. It slightly raised the cost of steel. Why?
Right.
Because if you put the tariff on, you have less competition, which means you can raise prices. They studied the effects of the steel tariffs by former President George W. Bush in 2002, 2003. They found they were responsible for 168,000 fewer jobs per year in steel-using industries, on average, more jobs than there are in the entire steel sector. There's collateral damage on it. And that's before the reciprocal tariffs come in. Right. And so, you know, that's the problem, that when you increase the cost of anything, for years we fought with Democrats who said raising the minimum wage has no effect. In fact, their argument was raising the minimum wage means people have more money, And if there's more money, they buy more things. So naturally, it has to increase the economic output, right?
Right.
What did they forget? Who pays the extra cost in the minimum wage? The company. The company's trying to keep the profit margin going. What happens? The consumer has to pay more.
Oh.
As we saw, as we see in California right now, the raising of the prices, especially in California with fast food.
And what do we hear in the arguments leading up to all this? Well, they're not going to raise it, so they're greedy now and not paying their employees. Same thing with oil companies.
Yeah.
Oil companies are greedy. Then Obama wanted to do a windfall profits tax, which would raise the cost of the oil to the consumer because they're going to cover their margins. And then people try to say, well, no. They'll just absorb that. So they're not greedy now.
Yeah. We got to go after them because they're greedy. And then when we go after them, they're going to stop being greedy.
Right.
Even though there's nothing stopping them from being greedy.
Right.
So there you go. Just looking at so that's the problem with tariffs. You protect certain industries, and then the industries that rely on that, their price goes up, which means they buy less of it, they produce less of it, and then they end up laying off. So there's a combination. It's not just inflation, because the administration's been focusing on, well, it doesn't cause inflation. Well, of course it causes inflation.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause out of control inflation like as you see when the government prints money to buy its own debt and the government borrows trillions of dollars and just throws that money to the consumer. That's what caused the massive inflation.
Right.
That's what caused but still the inflationary pressure is caused by any type of tariff out there. And you get that pressure, the inflation pressure, you get the pressure on the fact that the product goes up in price, means less of it is actually bought. And because less of it's actually bought, you end up laying off people.
Right.
It's a simple thing. It's how economics works. And in my, 36 years now of doing talk radio, that's one of the things that is mind-boggling to me, how so many people still don't get a clue. They'll buy into the narrative that if you increase prices, there is no effect.
Well,
if you increase the cost of doing business, it's a positive. It may be necessary. You may need to tax in order to provide, that may be the cost of doing business, taxes. But the fact is they have an economic impact, and no one can stop that.
Right, because, ultimately, when we talk about all these things that impact the price and impact the demand, right? The economy is supply and demand. We hear things, from callers and people giving us feedback. We hear things like, well, if we just put our mind to it, your mind, in fact, the mindset in business is serving the marketplace, whatever that demand is. When the government comes in and says, well, yeah, but we're going to throw this down, boom. Like a 25% tariff is not a small thing. Well, that changes the demand because that changes the consumer's mind. It's designed to do that. And so the behavior changes, and now the demand becomes something based on dancing around what the government has put in place. And correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we were getting away from that. When we talk about deregulation or doing away with regulations, why do we do away with regulations? To lower the costs, so companies can do business, so things aren't so expensive. In fact, cars. the cost of regulation on a car. There are things we're willing to pay for, obviously, safety. I always go with the option, I don't know if they're optional, but I go with the option of getting the brakes every time that I buy a car. I choose yes.
Well,
the box that says yes.
Well, that's because you learned from watching the Flintstones.
Exactly. I don't want my feet to be burning.
Does a job on your heels.
So horrible. And on my way to the store to get a dinosaur egg, which is enormously expensive. But
oh, God, how low have we gone, Flintstones?
Right? But you look at that dynamic of what it is we were trying to get away from and what it is we're actually doing. Because changing the behavior, if the president telling the press yesterday, we played the audio cut earlier, we're going to have so much money we won't know where to spend it from tariffs. Actually, the behavior changes. And if you're talking about 25% on the back of a car, on the price of a car, just all of a sudden, boom, the cost is 25% more. Then there's going to be a big change in consumer activity on that.
By the way,
so the money thing you can't count on because you don't know how fast the market's going to react and to what extent.
By the way, the president said that yesterday, there's going to be more money than we know what to do with. Who is getting the money?
Right, yeah.
Who's getting this money? Am I getting the money? Because if I'm getting the money, then I'm all for the tariff.
Well,
if there's more money than I can possibly know what to do with, I want it.
Right.
Along with no taxes on Social Security this October 1st.
Well, but how did we get the money if that is to happen? If that's to happen, how does it come to be?
The American consumer pays
Well,
it.
I give you the money. Oh, but it's going to benefit you. Well, how?
Yeah, it comes from the American consumer.
Are you saying I'm going to get a tax rebate for the exact same amount?
Yeah, the administration was trying early on to say, well, no, when the product comes into the country, it's you don't pay it. It's paid for, by the manufacturer who's exporting it to the United States, which is like the whole minimum wage argument.
Right.
Well, the consumer isn't paying for the minimum wage. Well, the minimum wage goes up. It's the employer that decides to raise the cost of goods and services to pay for the minimum wage, but the minimum wage itself doesn't cause an increase in the prices or for the customer to pay more.
It's passed on to the consumer.
Stop it.
It's passed on to the consumer.
Stop it. Don't talk to us like children.
Well, and if you're using that logic, then I'm afraid you're probably going to revisit the VAT tax. And there's one where it's a compounding tax all along the supply chain at many different levels that there's no way to keep track of it. The one thing about tariffs is you can bet your bottom dollar, and it might just be your bottom dollar, if you go buy a car or a truck with a tariff on it, that the dealership is going to mention to you or will have it in writing there, this is as a result of the tariff, this increase. That's going to happen. There's no way they're not going to do that. They're not going to all of a sudden say, yeah, we're gouging. By the way, wait for that if they go into effect. They're gouging. Well, they're passing it along. That's gouging.
866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by Howes Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
What are the highlight projections for this year's Agriculture Department's dairy forecast? USDA dairy analyst Peyton Ferrier at this year's Ag Outlook Forum with the details.
Milk production is expected to grow modestly by 0.4%. That's primarily based on herd growth of 0.4% with a slight growth in yield, that's milk per cow. Milk components, the fats and skim solid percentages are expected to grow. The all milk price is projected to be nearly unchanged at $22.60 per hundredweight. And feed costs, the cost cost of feed is expected to fall in the coming year.
A breakdown of product price projections for 2025 shows American butter and cheese prices competitive globally, while less competitive prices are expected in the world market this year for U.S. non-fat dry milk and whey. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's our calling. I'm Gary McNamara. You know, he mentioned Steve Moore, who served as an economic advisor to Trump in his first term, along with Larry Kudlow, and they were brought in because of the Peter Navarros or whatever, in order to bring balance in to say, no, we can't tariff an economy to success in the first term. And Stephen Moore, and that's why you got USMCA like you did, why there wasn't a huge change like they were promising, even though Trump said it was the best deal ever. He hasn't referred to it there, but everything he's referring to Canada right now was negotiated by him in USMCA, by Trump and his advisors.
Yeah.
But Steve Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, who was a former economic advisor to Mr. Trump, said the issue for the president is timing. Moore said Trump should have waited until Congress passed tax cuts to institute tariffs. You and I said that. Other Republicans did too. We said that's what Republicans are thinking. Do the pro-growth stuff first before you do stuff. You and I said before Trump took over, we were worried about the economy. If we have negative growth in this first quarter, I don't blame it on the tariffs.
No.
I won't do that. I don't know about whatever happens because I don't know. I won't speak to the second quarter because I don't know what's going to happen that way. But Moore said, let's get the economy booming first,
Right.
then talk about tariffs. I think there needs to be a bit of priority shift. The question hanging over Washington is how long Mr. Trump can stomach a declining stock market and the ensuing negative media coverage that accompanies it. Steve Moore said, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm sure the president's concerned about the losses in the stock market over the last 10 days. We all are. And you and I said it. The White House was saying yesterday, no, we care more about business activity than the stock market. They care about the stock market. If you know anything or follow Donald Trump for any length of time, he's obsessed with where the stock market is.
Yeah,
so we know
certainly
that's
you certainly want to follow trends because 1, 2, or 3 days you may think, well, we can correct that. You get into a trend beyond that, and it starts to hurt politically. Yeah. There's no way around that.
And you can tell by the reaction. I mean, it's changed drastically. You had his Treasury Secretary just say a couple days ago, no chance of a recession. Now they're saying, there has to be a transition period. Trump with Marie Bartiromo the other day, hesitated, said, well, you just can't read into these things. You can see the shift slowly happening, which, again, the markets notice that.
Yeah.
And then they talk about the natural adjustment. We're going to have to go through the detox period, as his Treasury Secretary said. And he's been talking. As you said, the car industry went to him and said, what are you doing? The farmers went to him.
Yep.
And that's why he backed off on those tariffs.
Well, I had suspected there were a number of things going on as he talked about tariffs more and more that the private sector was reaching out to him because many of these people know him personally. And so they will have his ear. They will tell him one thing you're not considering is this is going to do this and that's going to do that. Because right now it seems Navarro's taking the lead. Navarro basically is so far has the control on the tariffs, not including the tapping the brakes.
He meets with members of the Business Roundtable today.
That'll be
interesting.
Does. Yep.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. All right, this is great. One of my favorite headlines yesterday. Ready for this?
Okay.
Far-left columnist Ruth Marcus self-deports from the Washington Post. John Nolte of Breitbart.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, self-deports.
And then
I like
writes, first sentence, after 40 years with the failing Washington Post, columnist Ruth Marcus announced today in a bit of a, well, I never huff, that she is leaving. So there you go. It's,
All right.
All right.
Self-deports.
Let's talk about the great things going on in the Trump administration. Number one, you saw the one where Tom Homan, I almost said Bowman. Tom Homan said they want to expect 200 work sites every single week around the country.
Good.
Which is really good. Here's another one. This one I went, whoa. The Trump administration relaunched the Biden administration's smartphone application used by nearly 1 million migrants to enter the United States as a self-deportation tool dubbed CBP Home. The new application will offer several features, including allowing illegal immigrants to declare an intent to self-deport and leave the country. If they do that, because you'd say, well, what's the reward? If they do that, they will be allowed to come back legally.
Oh.
If they do not use the app to do this, they will not be allowed ever to come back in the country. So
Interesting.
That's because I wonder, well, what's the incentive? Well, the incentive is if you do it, you can come back.
Right, yeah.
Well, all is forgiven. You can go through the process of coming back again to be an American citizen.
Right. Well, and because what are we talking about? What's the greatest concern? And you and I covered it knowing that right now the political tone is, hold on, close it first, seal it off, and then we can talk about legal immigration. But on legal immigration, I don't know if I can say most people. I think a lot of people, though, are of the mindset, no, if it's proper and thorough vetting, it's all we ask for. Because if you're going to expand an economy, you're going to need the workers. You're going to need the manpower. We're not creating people anymore. We just got a really low birth rate, and I don't know if that's going to change. You know, there's a story out about Gen Z has more traditional values when it comes to marriage.
I'm looking at it right now. We did not talk about that.
No.
It's the next story in my hand.
Segue.
Look at that. See?
Wow. There it is.
It's the next story in my hand.
There it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's go right to it then.
Okay.
According to the Times Generation Z study, only a fifth of 18 to 27-year-olds believed that marriage was irrelevant, while a third thought it was better for a couple to be married before having children. Additionally, research showed that young adults today were more in favor of marriage than young adults 20 years ago, when almost twice the population, 39%, said marriage, And it's not just marriage that Gen Zers view differently, but sex as well. In 2004, 78% of millennial respondents considered one-night stands or casual sex outside of marriage to be a common practice for people in their lives. 78% in 2004. What do you think? And I know you know the answer, but just give people it's like you can do like a game show. What do you think the percentage is now of young people that consider one-night stands and casual sex outside marriage to be a common practice for people in their lives? You make your guess?
Well,
it was 78% in 2004. Now, 23%.
Well, my question is the qualifier. A common acceptable practice or just that it's happening? That it's happening doesn't mean that it's prevalent, doesn't mean that they think it's okay. That's where my qualifier question is. So are they saying it's a common practice or it's acceptable practice? Because there is a difference. I took it as acceptable, but
either way, it's huge. Whether it's acceptable or common practice, it means it's not.
Well,
it means they're not having it.
If it's not having it, it explains the very low birth rate.
Well, is it? Let me ask this question. Are young people just uglier than our beautiful generation that we grew up in? Of beautiful people.
Aside from my grandkids, yes.
Where we were just irresistible.
Yeah, right. That's how it was. That's how it was. We were just better looking. This group, I don't even know.
This is interesting. Even a third of Gen Zers felt couples should get married before having kids. However, researchers believe this worldview is not necessarily driven by a desire for romance and companionship so much as it's stemming from a pursuit of economic survival. But you think about it before.
That's interesting.
But before the Industrial Revolution, part of the culture wasn't just romance and procreation. You needed that family unit in order to survive.
No, everybody, yeah, it was.
So, I mean, that's not people, well, that's a terrible thing.
Well, no. Kids can work. They just choose not to. They're lazy by nature. Nap time. Are you kidding me? Nap time. Nap time's at 10 p.m. It's, I think, well, wow, I'd love to delve into that more with that group of respondents. Because, you know, when there is a family unit, things do get done. Case in point, we're transplanting some of the seedlings for my wife's vegetable garden coming up here in a few days. And my lovely granddaughters, the oldest, they're fully on board. They said, hey, if you make us tacos, we'll come over, feed us, and we'll help you do the work. And they pitch in. They love doing it. One time we filled our truck with bags of dirt, and they were hauling these things on their shoulders. Like, I was like, man, I almost stood up out of my chair and applauded as I was watching them do all that work. And you know, so to that extent, but when you go back to, as you were mentioning, really, when there was this agricultural base in America, then it required everybody to do their chores. When I was growing up, you know, if you have a family, everybody's got to pitch in and do something. I started mowing the lawn when we moved to San Antonio, and that was the first house that Mom and Dad ever purchased. It was the one they bought in San Antonio on Adams Hill Drive. And that backyard was so big. I mean, compared to me, I was just a runt. I was probably 6 or 7, and Dad let me help. And I remember, you know, I did a couple of rows by myself, you know. But is this generation, is Gen Z, of the mindset that this also has to do with, like, the economy, not just the economy of a family within a household, but we're going to need to create more humans in order to grow an economy? I would love to get into that psychology with them. And
just so you know, Gen Z are people born between 97 and 2012.
Yeah. That would include I guess half of my grandchildren. So, yeah, all right.
I will say this. You know, you and I, remember how long ago we go back about 15, was it about 15 years ago? Or I can't believe we've been together 20 years.
I know.
This July. Just
Crazy.
mind-boggling. I'm trying to think. Remember that book that was written? Was it Don't
Live to Work.
Work to Live or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, Work to Live.
That, you know, and was that like 20 years ago?
It was about
Let's
that.
go on vacation.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I meet so many young people in their 20s that have an incredible work ethic today. I really do.
Yeah, yeah.
Incredible work ethic.
Right.
When I was up in the hotel I was staying in, I met the entertainment manager of the hotel, 23 years old. She's the manager. She also has a second job.
Mm-hmm.
She also has all these incredible goals of what she wants to do. And I was really impressed. And that's just that's just the latest person that I met. But here in Texas, I meet so many young people that just are working like crazy and want to. It's not like they're going, oh, I want to. It's like, I got to do this. I got this to do. It's like in their minds, they're driven to stay busy and be productive.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe in this era, I don't know, brief era of where we're not having children, where we're in this very low birth rate, maybe there is that rediscovery of purpose, right? Why are we here? What is it that what are we looking for out of life? And how do we gain that independence? How do we, you and I growing up, we talked about it numerous times. In our generation, it was about gaining that independence. You could live on your own. You could pay for things on your own. You could make your own decisions.
I'll be honest. I hated authority.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents giving me an allowance was an authority dictating what I had to do to get the money. I'd rather have somebody else dictate to me what to do and get the money.
That's
and
right.
have my parents leave me alone. But the unfortunate thing was when I found that, my parents still didn't leave me alone.
Well, and to be honest, our management here has only grounded us like 3 times. So it's much better.
No, I got a timeout.
Exactly. Go to your room. Think about what you've done. But it's...
Tell that to a talk show host.
Right.
Sit in the corner and think about what you've done.
Think about and not talk about it.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't do my show if I thought about what I said.
Exactly.
And have done.
Right. Nobody wants to do that. But I think I had wondered if there is a cycle, and I do wonder, where you go through this low birth rate and it's like, okay, tap the brakes. What are we doing here? But then in that moment, that generation, that's coming of age in that time period, are they reconsidering again? Okay, these are the things that have to be in place. I will tell you this, just knowing my oldest 4 granddaughters, and they range in age from 16 to nearly 20. That's to me. And their friends, it's anecdotal, but they're very pragmatic, but they do put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
Even the one, and I won't mention her name, that is known in the family for not making the exact same contributions. I just heard she's going to the gym every day and crushing it. And at work, she's being promoted like crazy at her job. She's 18 now. And, it's like something totally different than you would think, right?
Yeah.
And I hope that's generational and not just about my lovely granddaughters.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, they've got to step up here. They got a lot of debt to pay.
That's right.
Not theirs.
Not theirs.
Ours.
All right. Their children and grandchildren got a lot of things to do.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So Trump meeting with the Business Council today will be interesting to see what happens now. As we didn't even get to this point today, as Ontario now has put on a 25% tariff on electricity going into New York, Michigan, and I think, who else? Is it Illinois?
Yeah. Well,
he had the premier had said they were going to cut electricity. They decided to tariff it instead.
Right.
So they're going full force.
Yep.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.